Okay. Thank you. Well, I must tell you that after watching presentations yesterday and today that I feel a little bit like Zsa Zsa Gabor's ninth husband. I know what to do. I'm just not sure I can make it interesting, but we'll give it a shot. So we're going to talk about the Canada-Mexico relationship. And of course, everything is impact on mining in Mexico. But we're also going to discuss the movement of capital. So in Mexico, Canada has three missions. Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City, of course, where our embassy exists. And in our priority sectors in Mexico, you see mining is right up there at the top. So mining in Canada, we're one of the largest mining nations in the world. Our employment exceeds 620,000. That's one job for every 30 jobs in Canada. And our mining supply sectors have more than 3,700 companies. On our Toronto Stock Exchange and the Venture Exchange, the world's #1 mining and exploration listing venues in the world. In Mexico, of course, one of the largest mining sectors. And for Canada, it's our 7th largest recipient of Canadian mining assets abroad, 219. Now, that dropped down quite a bit over the COVID, et cetera, and the troubles that we're having, but it's coming back now in 2021, 2022. So Global Affairs Canada tells me that as of June 2022, that Mexico is one of Canada's top 10 export destinations. More than 10,000 companies do business with Mexico. And Canada has a $40 billion worth of bilateral trade and investment with Mexico. Quite significant to Canada. And Canada's Prime Minister is extending his North-South agenda. So countries like Mexico are becoming more important. Heading into South America, countries like Guyana are taking on importance as well with their mining sector. So, what are some of the difficulties related to raising capital in today's extraction sector? So I reached out to a number of people and I got some responses here. The first two are from banks, so my grandson, who's 8 years old, could have given the same answer. But RBC Financial says rising cost of capital, waning investor interest, and high-risk investments. Anybody could have told me that. The next bank tells me that metal prices have rolled over now, and the sentiment for the market is very low. Again, my grandson. So now we get into a mining guy from Vancouver, who's quite negative on this, I must admit, but current rising rate environment, current rising rate environment, and the increasingly firm ESG type regulations. Now, whether he likes it or not, those are here to stay. And his political changes in many mining jurisdictions, of course, that threaten higher royalties, higher taxes, or possible nationalization. So he's quite negative on the future. This is one of our largest independent brokerage firms in Canada, and they say that if you have the words lithium or rare minerals in the company name, you will then attract the attention of the public. Now, if it is something that can aid in making batteries for electric cars, you have the investor interest. Now, I think what I heard earlier on, that copper is about to make a huge explosion, and I would say in 4 to 6 months I'm going to wish I had more money invested in copper. This was the most pragmatic response, and it came from one of our attendees here, Brody Sutherland, the CEO of TalkFan. He said, increased or uncertain regulatory changes, of course, unstable metal prices, but this is something that really attached to me. Aging investor demographic. I'm 73. I retired, semi-retired. I can't retire. I tried that. I got bored to tears. But my wife is retired now, so I gave her, or should I say, she took control of our portfolios. And she's looking at investments that are more stable, more dividend-associated investments. So she's gone away from lower risk investments such as oil and gas and mining. But importantly, what he said here was, we need to attract a new generation that sees the potential of mining. And that was alluded to yesterday as well. Mining has to become more innovative, more efficient, more attached to what the future will hold for these young people. Otherwise, we'll never attract their attention. The other thing that he mentioned was, the media is controlling who we are. And the media will always print something negative. They're never going to print that this discovery was great and this company did a good job and that company. No, they're going to print what happened in West Africa, which we'll talk about later. They're never going to give us the image. We have to control for the future what our image is going to be. Now, I said we would talk about ESG. So ESG refers to 3 key factors when measuring the sustainability and the impact of an investment. And investors are checking and using ESG criteria. I can assure you of that, and I can prove it. According to JP Morgan, in 2011, 20% of the S&P 500 was using ESG criteria. Today, 85% of the S&P 500 uses ESG criteria. Now, increasing attention is being paid to climate change by the younger generation. And I was at COP21 on behalf of our government, and the younger generation believes that a large switch exists, which they can just flip, and we're off carbon. They don't understand the transition into less carbon in the world. They just want action now. So unless the mining industry, as you said yourself, doesn't show them innovation, efficiencies, and attention to the planet, you're not going to get their attention. And for the regular investor, they want to see more transparency and access to data. So in less than 20 years, the ESG movement has grown. It's a global phenomenon representing 30 trillion in assets right now. And in 2015 to 2019, 525% increase in ESG-linked products and companies. So, again, another speaker in advance of me. ESG is the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN from 2015. Prior to that, in a report, it was spoken of as "Who Cares Wins," which became the ESG principles, criteria. So very quickly, and you can read this later on, I think all of these presentations are going to be available. So the environmental side, carbon emissions, climate change, etc., water management. From the social end, human rights, salary, wages, health and safety, and how you deal with communities. And again, the diversity of your company. In the governance side of it, they want to know who the board is, who owns the company, how you're paying, and how you're accounting for what you're doing. Here's an example in Canada. This is the Ontario teachers. Their annual Responsible Investment and Climate Strategy report of September of this year said, how are we harnessing our capital to make a real-world impact? And how are we going to set a strategy in place to have that impact? Now, just so you know, this is not a fly-by-night outfit. They control $242 billion of investment assets. As of June of this year, this is a current figure. Now, the Harvard Business Review gives somewhat of an alternative view on ESG when they say that ESG investing isn't designed to save the planet. But their conclusion from that report, and the report is linked there, you can read the entire report if you like. Let's focus on setting appropriate boundaries for capitalism. market innovations will take over to address global challenges. What I read in this is, my firm belief is that industry is ahead of the government. Industry is willing to do what needs to be done to address. The government, however, has to set in place rules and regulations and a monitoring system that industry believes will be fair, just, and address their competition. Because if I'm being monitored, I want my competition monitored the same way. I'll be more happy to handle the rules and regulations if they're being monitored as well. In Canada, we established in 2019 the Canadian Ombudsman for Responsible Enterprise, CORE. It's an arm of government. It reports to government, and they review complaints about human rights by Canadian companies outside of Canada, in particular mining. This is their mandate. You can read that at your peril, but specifically, review a complaint that is submitted by or on behalf of an individual, organization, or community concerning human rights abuse. Now, this came into play most recently with this Canadian-owned company in West Africa who were charged with involuntary homicide in a flood. Vancouver-based company. Hein Frey was the vice president of operations. He was given a 24-month suspended sentence and a $4,000 fine. Daryl Christensen, the contractor, 12-month suspended sentence, $2,000 fine. The mine operator, $4,000 fine. Trivial, except that it completely destroyed them. While the fines were trivial, the aftermath of the deadly flood, the company's chances of securing a new financial package evaporated. They are now bankrupt. They've spent tens of millions of dollars on the cleanup, and they're virtually bankrupt. Because CORE exposed them, the Canadian government exposed them, and today, social media, 10 seconds later, you're exposed. Now, I don't know about REMA, but I picked this one up just to give you an example. The Mexican Network of People Affected by Mining. You have a number of NGOs, government agencies, organizations in Mexico that are also monitoring what you're doing as a mining company. And so you are being watched, and the government is struggling to get proper rules and regulations in place, but it's coming. So, conclusions. Mexico and Canada, they've got a strong government-to-government relationship. It needs to get better, and it is getting better. I'm assisting with that. My friend Jose Jabalera, who's the Director General of Mining, is a good friend of mine, and we're structuring him with a closer relationship to Canada. Mexico is an extremely important partner for Canada. Most countries in the world, Canada, Mexico most definitely, are monitoring how mining companies operate. Investors globally are monitoring mining companies through the ESG model. And finally, mining operations move ahead at their peril if they are not paying close attention to and adopting ESG principles. And let me add to that, after hearing discussions yesterday, we have to own our industry. We can't let somebody else report who we are, such as the media. So, innovation, efficiencies, effects on the globe, we have to do that and then promote it. So, people need to get in the mining industry, they need to get people in communications who can communicate that message. I assure you, it will benefit you in the long term. So this lovely person gave this presentation, and thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'll take a couple now. Otherwise, I'm around the floor, and please come up to me and talk to me anytime. Thank you very much.